Welcome to Ops or Die, the podcast for people that know ops isn't sexy until it saves your ass.
So, hi, I'm Dr. Robyn Lynette. I am a high-performance business psychologist and professional confidant. I work with founders, funders, executives, celebrities, athletes, anyone who wants to be at the very top of their game and recognizes that they're not looking for help so much as they're looking for an edge. And my background comes from growing up in a cult, and then I spent 14 years in the corporate world. I played competitive beach volleyball, and then I got to go to college when I was 32. I got my undergrad in clinical psychology and then a master's and doctorate in business psychology with a concentration in high performance and sport. And I recognized that all of that, the fact that I lived through so much chaos and that I got to study how to take chaos and actually create high performance, to be able to find flow on purpose, to recognize that being self-aware is an ongoing thing, not something you get to be finished with and then, okay, I'm self-aware now, has made me really good at working with people who want to achieve the most with their potential all of the time.
Nice. That is great. I am so excited that you are here. Your story is absolutely fascinating and very excited to hear what you have to say about what you do now. But we hear a lot of founders in our line of work talk about they're trying to fill a gap in the market. And that they saw that gap. Your origin story is so much different. You mentioned that it involves a cult. I'll also mention that it involves a cartel. But how does that inform how does your story help you to discuss the way the journey teaches you to survive, and how does that show up in the way entrepreneurs see their origin story and use it to survive and thrive?
Well, and you say a really powerful word there, and that's the word survive. So much of my early life was just one day to the next. How am I going to make it through? And people often ask me, like, how did you get to be so resilient? I got to be resilient because it was either that or die. Like, there was literally no middle ground. I could be sitting in a corner, rocking and addicted to drugs, or I can figure it out. And every day I made the decision, today I'm going to figure it out. And I think that's what I bring to the entrepreneurial story is sometimes it's not, there's a gap, I'm going for it. Sometimes it's, I have no idea what's happening, but I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah, we definitely see that. And I think, from my perspective, it's also kind of our origin story. Like, we come from operations, and operations is very much that territory where most of the time people fall into operations because someone's just thrown something at them and said, no one's dealing with this. Go figure.
Here's some chaos. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So very, very well versed in that kind of origin and trajectory.
Yeah. And I mean, let's face it, the journey of entrepreneurs is not necessarily the smoothest and easiest road out there, especially those early growth bootstrap. There's lots of things coming up them and a lot of survival skills required. Because things may happen, and as I say, lots of near-death experiences. So, and that can be quite dramatic. So the work that you're doing in this space, how did you realize when you went through this journey that everything you lived was actually something you could use as a superpower, and how you're now helping entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
Survive.
So I guess the first thing, it has to start with, why did I choose to study what I studied in college? And that was because when I was playing competitive beach volleyball, there were days I could get on the sand and I could do no wrong. Like, I could play the game. My game was on. I was winning. And then there were days my volleyball partner would hold out a volleyball to me and say, Robyn, this is a volleyball. Have you ever seen one before? Because I couldn't find my game. Like it just wasn't there. And so when I decided that I was going to go back to school, I knew I can talk. Hold on. I knew I wanted to understand that high performance. Why was it sometimes I could be in flow and it was so there, and other times I couldn't find it to save my life? And so when I went to my graduate work and I got to kind of balance the sports psychology and the business psychology together, I realized, oh, they're the same thing. One just uses your brawn and one uses your brain. They're exactly identical.
Fascinating. That resonates so much, and I'm sure our audience is sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense, because I feel like there's days where I am just on, like a workflow makes sense, and I know exactly what piece comes next, and I know where it's going, and I can see every single pathway. And some days I just stare at my computer like, how does this thing work?
Right? Exactly. Is that a volleyball? Exactly.
Yeah. And so seeing that connection point, do you ever go back and use your origin story and what you've learned throughout your life and translate that into, pull out the similarities with an entrepreneur, with a founder that you're working with, and say, this is you surviving, this is you doing this piece? Or how do you show them like where because your story is so specific and so amazing. And I feel like sometimes it's hard to make that relation, have it relate to someone else. So how do you find that connection?
So the first thing for me is my story lets people know that I'm not just a book smart, went through college. Oh, look, it's a pretty girl with a doctoral degree. Yay. No, like I've lived this. And so part of it is that people trust me quickly because they're like, oh, she gets it. She's been there. She's lived the chaos. And I have almost 20 years of doing this work. So I know they know it translates because I've done it. But then also, yes, I'm very good at picking things out. Like when somebody starts to, this is a really good example, that research is procrastination. I need to know more. I can't start till I'm 100% ready. I can't release something until I've proofread it 47 times, and then I have to reread it. And then if I change anything, I have to proofread it again. I will often ask them, who told you that? Where does that come from? Because so much of me, I've had to unpack from what I was told and who I was, and that I was average and I wasn't very smart and I couldn't make decisions because I was a woman, and I certainly shouldn't be leading anyone because I was a woman. So I have a lot of that I had to unlearn. Where did I learn that? Who said that? Whose voice is that? I even gave the negative voice in my head a name so I could recognize her. Her name is Harriet, and sometimes I have to tell her, sit in the back seat and be quiet. So that helps me when I say to people, look, I've had to unlearn XYZ thing. Who told you that? Where did that come from? Whose voice is that? Why do you believe that? And sometimes we walk that line on where it almost feels like therapy, because I'm like, you learned that somewhere. Let's see if we can find it and unlearn it.
Well, that speaks so much into a lot of things, because a lot of that is also to do with fear, and I liked how someone once told me the acronym for fear in their mind is false evidence accepted as reality. Now, when you're listening to these voices, and first of all, there's a recognition that needs to happen, and I mean, I come across it especially also with a lot of female executives. My own story, I was one of the first female engineers in the industry where I grew up, and there was a lot of these voices. Oh, you don't belong here. You're a woman. You don't belong here, and it's a battle to fight against that if you constantly hear it, not just from the industry you're in, but maybe from some people in your own community and those family members as well. So, so how do you help the entrepreneurs, first of all, recognize that combination between that fear of, oh, I may not be in the right place. I may be missing something. That's why I'm not moving forward.
Sometimes a good question to ask them, and I found this works interesting ways, is who do you think should be doing it if it's not you? What qualities does the person have who should be doing it that you don't have? Let's talk about those. And a lot of times they can't come up with qualities. It's just, well, I don't feel ready. Well, we can fix that feeling. That's, you just do it anyway. But if they come up with something where they're like, oh, well, the person who should be doing this XYZ thing I don't have, and it's legitimate, we can go get that. We can go do XYZ thing. We can learn that. But a lot of times when I say the person who should be doing it, what skills, knowledge, or ability do they have that you don't? They can't come up with a good answer.
Yeah. No, and those interior voices, the imposter syndrome, I think the women in my life have been more honest about feeling that way, but I think everyone feels like they're faking it till they make it.
Everyone has imposter syndrome unless they're an imposter. Imposters don't have imposter syndrome.
Yeah. I think we're seeing that in real time right now.
We're not going to go there. It's not that kind of podcast.
Thank God. No, but I did want to come back to something you said a little while ago, and that was talking about your background gives you credibility, because you didn't just go to school and get these degrees and things like that. And I think something that we see a lot with entrepreneurs and founders is they feel like they don't have necessarily the right background. They haven't come through a very specific scenario to become a founder, or things of that nature. There's this sense that and that goes to their imposter syndrome and all the other things, is they didn't take the right path to this place. And how do you work with that, and how do you get them to see it goes back to that imposter syndrome, but it's a little deeper than that even. So how do you work with that facet?
So the thing I like to talk about when it comes to this idea is that when we hear other people's stories, we always look at them backwards, right? We look at them like, oh, A went to B and B went to C and then C went to D. And what we don't realize is that it's much more like, I wanted to get from New York to London, and I got on a cruise ship that happened to be leaving that day, and it bumped into a tanker, and I got on that, and then there was a whale, and then I swam for a little while, and then I got on a turtle. Like, when you look backwards, it's like, oh yeah, of course that tanker was there. Why wouldn't it have been? But when you're actually living it, you may have to swim longer. You may have to get in a rowboat. I don't know what your story is going to be, but there's no right way to do it. It only looks right once you get at the other end. So you have to get to the other end to figure out what your right way was. And that's an interesting conversation when I start, because again, I can go to talk to me about an entrepreneur who did it the right way, and let's look at it. Let's see how much luck they had. Because they all do. Everyone, they had a mentor, somebody invested in them. Everybody had a point where they got some luck. It always happens. Even in my life, as chaotic as it was, there are places like, I'm really lucky I never had children. If I had had children, my life would have been completely different. So if I ask an entrepreneur, tell me who did it the right way, and let's look at where they had luck. All right, now you get to build your own luck.
Yeah, and it's, as I say, there is the saying that entrepreneurship is a lot of hard work and a bit of luck. And I like how you say you can, in a way, create the luck. So what does that look like?
I had a sports psychology professor who used to say, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And so what that means is you have to be ready. When the opportunity shows up, you have to be ready to recognize it and grab it. And I can point to times in my life where I had opportunity and I didn't recognize it and I didn't grab it. I missed it. But there's always another one. I mean, opportunities come around. You just have to be able to recognize them. And that means being prepared and being willing. When the one that I missed, the one that I'm like, oh, I missed that one. I heard a guy, billionaire guy speak. And at the end, I went up and talked to him, and he said to me, "That's really interesting. I'd love to continue the conversation. Are you available to go grab a drink?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." But immediately I went into, this isn't about business. He's trying to hit on me. That this, like, my brain went into survival mode of he's not interested in my brain. He's interested in my body. And I had a good conversation with him, but the whole time I was playing defense. Could I have been right? Could he? Yes. Could I have been better at perhaps having an opportunity? Maybe, because he did ask me, "What does your business need right now?" And I did not have a good answer for a man with that kind of money.
Oof, that one hurts.
So it could have been a really big thing for me. I could be right. He could have been trying to not be business appropriate, but I didn't have a good answer when he did ask about my business, and that was a fail. I didn't have the opportunity presented itself, and I wasn't prepared. Missed that lucky.
That's rough. And I feel like a lot of people have experienced that. A lot of entrepreneurs, but a lot of people in general. I think speaking to that kind of opportunity idea and looking at people's stories backwards, one of the things that when I became a founder, which is recent for me as well, like this is my first
She had to be pushed in some ways.
I had to be pushed in a lot of ways. So I read a lot about entrepreneur and success as a startup. I'm trying to figure out what makes a startup successful, because we're trying to help that, right? As far as what we do. And it kept talking about timing. Oh, it's, timing is a big factor in if your startup's going to be successful, and timing. And I was like, timing is only visible backwards.
Right.
So it's easy to say when you're studying startups and their success, saying, oh, timing was a factor. When you're in it, that's that opportunity that you just talked about. You have to get good at seeing opportunities, because looking back, you're going to say, oh, the timing was great for the market, or the timing was great for this product, or the timing was great for, getting that investment. But you can only see that in hindsight.
Right.
Going forward, living it, you have to be looking for those opportunities and the market opportunities and things like that, and seize them in the moment. Because you can't plan for timing to be there. No. I mean, I wish you could. That'd be great.
And the other thing I think people don't realize when it comes to being in it is, when you hear the story backwards, it can be, oh, I worked for 2 years, or I worked for 3 years, or however long it is. When you're in it, if you knew, okay, in 3 years you're going to be successful, great, I can plan for that, we'll figure it out. But when you're in it, you don't know, is this going to be 10 years? Am I going to get, like, my business, I'm going to get so far in and then it's going to hit the fan and I'm going to have to pivot? Is COVID going to happen and shut everything down and all my clients are going to say nope? And then you have to pivot? Like, you don't know. So when you look at a story backwards and they're like, I worked really hard and slept on the couch for 6 months. I'd sleep on a couch if I knew it was going to be 6 months. Like, that's not a big deal. But you don't know it when you're on the couch. Is that going to be a 5-year thing?
Yeah. Or do I quit or continue?
When do I pivot, and this is a fun question. What's the difference between being resilient and being stubborn?
Yeah, that's a very important question, because
tell me more.
I think there's times when we're both, isn't there? But I think, what is your answer to that?
Well, so I have a story that goes with that. The best advice I've ever been given in my life was, Robyn, you are resilient. Stop making decisions that make you prove it. And I was so angry when he said that to me. I was like, how dare you suggest that the chaos in my life is my fault? Do you see this person and that person, and this is happening and that person's... And it took me a really long time to realize I get to decide who gets to be in my life. And if someone's creating chaos, I don't have to be resilient and fix it. I can be resilient and kick them out of my life. And so for me, the question of resilience is, am I making choices that are actually making a difference? And am I taking the feedback I'm getting from those choices and making wise decisions? Or have I just picked a point and I'm pounding toward it regardless of what feedback I get?
Yeah. And I mean, that's actually an important principle as well when you're looking at the some of the principles around self-mastery, right?
Mm.
You are average of the 5 people closest to you. And I once had someone say, okay, if there's 5 people, you always want 2 to stretch you up and pull you up.
Mm.
You want 1 or 2 that you are peers with, and then there's 1 or 2 that you want to also help pull up.
Oh, that's amazing.
But you've got to
Yeah.
be careful about the ones you're trying to pull up because some of them could be like parasites just sucking up the time and not really, as you say, once you need to recognize to cut out. But that's also had a profound impact in my career, is just understanding that. And as you say, being able to make that decision, who do you allow in, and who do you need to cut out? But just coming back to around the self-sabotage aspect, so what's some of the top most common ways that you see founders are destroying their own success right now, where they have really no idea because there is a blind spot initially around it as well?
So the very, very top one has to be not being coachable or self-aware. And what's funny about that is that I have never in my life met someone who was like, oh yeah, I'm not coachable. Everyone thinks they're coachable. And so you have to kind of ask yourself, am I being coachable? Am I actually coachable? What does that look like? How do I take advice? How do I use feedback? So not being coachable, not being self-aware, two big self-sabotage. Another one, and I'm sure you both see this really regularly, is believing that they're not worth spending budget on. So many entrepreneurs will not budget for their own self-growth, for themselves, for their well-being. Like they feel like, and this part of this is a very American culture, is that I'll figure it out. I don't need therapy. I don't need help. I don't need a coach. I don't need a mentor. I'll figure it out. So not being willing to spend budget on themselves, that's a big self-sabotage. Not being willing to accept help, admit either they need help or they want edge and they need help getting that edge. Those are big ones. Psychological barriers. Those are things like imposter syndrome, which we talked about, hyper independence, that belief that no one can do it as well as I can, and I have to do it all myself. And hyper independence, interestingly, is a trauma response. It's a trauma response to, usually in childhood, but often even in young adulthood, not having people you can trust to help you. When you ask for help and people tell you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that'll make you hyper independent. And what that looks like is they don't delegate, they don't ask for help, they don't accept help when it's offered, they overanalyze, back to that research's procrastination idea. So that's definitely another big self-sabotage. Self-medicating, drugs, alcohol, food, sex, etc. Not getting enough sleep. Those are big. I want to circle back real quickly to toxic relationships, because those are self-sabotaging. That can be damaging relationships. It can be ambivalent relationships. Ambivalent relationships are the ones where you don't know when you go to someone if they're going to love you or hate you, if they're going to praise you and celebrate you or tear you down. You don't know what you're going to get. Those are the most toxic. Someone who is always toxic, you can deal with that. Someone who always loves you and supports you, you can deal with that. But someone who switches teams, get rid of those people. They're horrible. Busyness culture, that's a big one. People are so busy being busy, they're not being productive. I see that a lot. Avoiding tough decisions, and this can be around staff, partners, vendors, which means they get stuck with somebody. You hire somebody and they're horrible, but you stick with it because you don't want to make a tough decision. Moving the goalposts, that's one where they reach a goal, but then rather than celebrating and saying, look, we did something amazing. We're great. Pat yourself on the back. Yay. Okay. Yeah, great. What's the next mountain? I'm guilty of that one. I have to be really careful about that one. So, those are a few. I can just negative self-talk, lack of focus, all of those. So is there any one of those that's interesting that you're like, oh, let's talk about that one?
I
So
mean,
there's so many
there's so many there, and I'm not gonna lie, you start talking about them and I'm like, oh God, that's me.
We all do them to some extent.
Yeah.
We all do all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think to me, one of the ones I have the biggest, I think the biggest problem with is the hyper independence. And honestly, I don't know where it comes from. I actually have been lucky to have very supportive roots my whole life.
Were you celebrated for doing things yourself?
Constantly.
Hello, there it is.
So, but I feel like I have to do everything. And I feel like I see this a lot too in founders, is they have to be good at all the things. They can't you can't just be good at the thing you're good at. You have to know all the different pieces. You have to be able to complete all the different pieces as a one person army, if you will. And it's definitely something I am guilty of. I have a terrible time delegating and like giving up control. Or Maria deals with it all the time.
That's a trust issue.
So it's just, how do you get people past that and make them realize, because it's something we try and do with our clients too, because they feel like giving up control of operations is failing in some weird sense. And so how do you convince people that that's not true, that you can be good at what you're good at and hand off what you need to?
Yeah, and that goes back to Maria's point about fear. They feel like if they hand it off, they don't know what's going on. If something falls apart, it's on them. You know, if you hand off your social media to someone and they post something you don't believe in, you're doing damage control. Right? So they're very afraid of, if I hand it off. So getting someone to hand off something they're actually not good at is easier than getting someone to hand off something they are good at. Because if you are good at, I can do it better, but you have other responsibilities. And that's where I come up with the 80% rule. If you have someone that can do something 80% as well as you can, let them do it and pick up the 20% that falls through the cracks.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting now when you look at the whole trends in AI with that philosophy as well. There's this perception that, oh, these agents can do things better than I can. So therefore, there's not a fear to hand it off. Some risk in that, and obviously to consider there as well. But it's harder to do with human beings, and I've seen so many times throughout my career as well. And I want to come back a bit when founders actually built the company culture, which is also, I think, the aspect where the work you do is so important. If you want to set up that culture, the thing that will destroy the company culture as well, because it mimics you and your behaviors, when it's a fear-based culture, because one of the things that people are fearful of handing it over, they become micromanagers.
Yep.
So there's a lot more just about self within in that team perspective, but also how do I get that culture to get the self-awareness in the organization structure as well, once people start operating in that fear-based mode, which start bringing up all the other saboteurs, as you call them.
So I think the first thing that entrepreneurs need to realize is that they are building a company culture, whether they realize it or not. So they can either do it on purpose or by accident. And doing it on purpose means right from the very beginning, you need to have conversations. I talk about creating a team communication fingerprint. So each one of us individually has an individual communication fingerprint, and it's all kinds of things. It's created by your background and who raised you and what you've learned and how you've taught yourself to communicate. But every one of us has a communication fingerprint. And when you come together as a team, when you create a team and a culture, those come together to create a team communication fingerprint. But if you don't do it on purpose, you're going to get the worst of what everybody has to offer, because you'll end up with, how do we handle conflict? We handle conflict with the most conflict aggressive person that's in the team, because they're the person that handles conflict. So then conflict becomes whatever that is. How do we handle problems we have with vendors? That gets handled by whoever's the least hateful of dealing with vendors. They may not do it well. And so what we have to do instead is purposefully talk about, what does it look like for us to hold each other accountable? How do we do that on this team? If I do something that is outside of what we've decided is our norm, our team communication fingerprint, how is that addressed? Does Maria come to me and like scream at me in front of everybody in the team? Probably not. That's not the ideal way to do it. Does somebody pull me aside privately and say, hey, this is how our team does this? And have I accepted that I'm willing to be held accountable by this team because I trust you to do it in a caring, dare I say, loving way rather than a mean way? Also, another big one is I always encourage people to create an assumption of the positive. We as humans are really quick to jump to the negative. Somebody did something and they're horrible, they hate me, they're trying to fire me. We try to jump to the negative. Now, in some cultures, that's true, and it's valid that you should jump to the negative and go fix your resume. But if you're trying to create a healthy culture, you want people to assume the positive. Where if something happens, Katie does something and my feelings are hurt, I don't go talk to Maria and be like, Katie did this and now I'm mad. I go to Katie and say, hey, this bothers me. Can we have a conversation about it? And we don't create teams that don't allow triangulation, which is going to talk to everybody else except the person you have a problem with. But you have to create it on purpose. If you don't create a culture on purpose, you're going to get a culture by default.
Yeah. And also whoever is the head lead in that company sets the tone of the culture as well. And I've seen so many times companies where they start with great cultures and the memory of that culture is not built in as other people start joining. And then other people start joining and they basically come in and that person has a really terrible culture. And suddenly the whole company goes down into a mode of fear and survival. And either people will just stay in that company because the job market might be not conducive to finding other things. And they feel they just need to hang on for dear life with all the trauma with that. And not much really get done. And I always love how people want to be innovative cultures. But if you kill that, if you lead with a culture of fear and you kill questions, there's no ways you're ever going to be that. And, or you get the reverse of that as well. So what's your advice to companies? Because I know you've got a framework that you work with either in self-sabotage, but also if we look at the larger from company sabotage, tell us a bit more about the type of frameworks that you are working with and your framework on how you start dealing with that. And as I say, holding one another accountable in teams as well.
Yeah.
And yourself.
The first thing we have to figure out is, where are we? What is our baseline? And this comes from the work that I've done in the past with college teams, sports teams, because talk about turnover. They have people graduating every year and freshmen coming in every year. And if we don't know where we are, we can't tell people this is what our culture is. So that's the first thing, is where are we? And what do we want it to look like? And the interesting thing is, when I ask, I work a lot with founders and CEOs, when I ask them, what do you want it to be? They can give me an answer, but I will often say, have you asked the people on your team? Have you asked the people doing the work? Because this isn't something that you decide at the executive level, this is our culture, and you pass it down. That's not how cultures work. Cultures are built from within. And the bigger your team currently is, the harder it's going to be to turn that boat around. So you have to really ask them. I did this once with an airline where the people I was working with said, "Oh, Robyn, you're not a pilot. You should never talk to pilots." And I'm like, "Why?" Well, because pilots won't respect people who aren't pilots. But then a day happened where the pilot who was supposed to be interviewing this group of pilots couldn't come in. And so they were like, "Well, sorry, it's going to be awful, but you're going to have to go talk to pilots." And I went in, I sat in a room with 20 pilots and I said, "You know what? I'm not a pilot. Tell me what it's like and what you'd like, how you'd like it to be better." After that, I interviewed all the pilots because I just asked them, "Tell me what you'd like." So that's the first thing. What do we have and what would we like it to be? And then how do we make that better? And once you have it where this is our culture and this is how we handle conflict and this is how we communicate and this is how things work, when someone new comes in, you have ability to say to them, "This is the way we do it here," rather than it being ad hoc and whatever they do might overpower what you've been doing.
Yeah. And that's also, sorry, Katie, and
sorry, go
that's
ahead.
also so important when it comes to the hiring decisions as well, right?
Oh gosh.
Yes, so hiring is interesting because it's very easy to hire people that are exactly like you because they're so easy to communicate and they feel like they fit. And oh yeah, these people are like me. But did you end up with a group that group thinks because nobody has any different ideas? So the challenge is, how do you bring in people who think differently and will challenge you in a respectful and kind way? Again, back to culture, that keep you from ending up in that group think space.
Yeah, one of the things I think is interesting about all of the things that you just talked about is in that cultural perspective, you run into a lot of situations where I would say talk is cheap, action matters, where people have laid out like, "Oh, this is what our culture is," and they will say all the right words and things like
Put
that.
it on the wall.
Then they'll put it on the wall, they'll put it on the website, they'll put it in the onboarding packet. And then the first meeting, all of that is out the window. Like the new hire or what have you sits down and has their first meeting or their first team meeting or team event or things like that, and people are shut down or people just are not nice to each other, or things are happening that completely negate all of these words. And how do you get people to see that about themselves? Because I think it goes back to like but we have this culture and we've written it down and things like that. Do you ever record people and make them watch it?
Well, I've had CEOs ask me to sit in on boardrooms and meetings and different things specifically to say, "This is what our culture is. Is that what we're doing?" And now, when you're an outsider if you're in a people in the trenches meeting and you're an outsider, they're going to be really careful about what they say. But if you're in a one-on-one with somebody and if you find someone like me who works in the trenches and you ask them what's going on, they will tell you. So I spent 14 years in the corporate world, and I remember we had a time where one of the big head honchos came in and gave us this big speech about how we're all on a cruise ship and we have to be doing all of our work so that, we can all get along and have this great cruise. And it was a very inspiring speech. And at the end, he said, "Do you have any questions?" And I stood up. This did not do well for my career, but I stood up and said, "Do you realize that you're up on the deck having a jazz and cocktail party and I'm in the engine room bailing water?"
Oh my God, that's amazing. I wish more people would do that.
What was the reaction?
Well, it's not that bad. And he was it was not a good situation. But the point is, if you take someone like me who is trustworthy and can get people to engage with them, and you give people confidentiality, that's the other thing. I'm very well trained in confidentiality. When I go into an organization and I am given carte blanche to talk to whoever I want, I will find out if your culture is what you say it is or not.
Yeah. And what's been some of the reactions from when you come back and say they might have a perception the culture is here and the culture is here, and you give them that feedback? Have you ever had those executives tell you, "Well, who said that? Tell me who said that"?
And then I will ask them, I've asked them, is this something you want to learn from and train to, or is this something you want to punish? Because you right now are in punish, and that's not going to fix this. That actually tells me why this culture is the way it is.
Oh, wow.
And because I will call them out. I mean, that's what they pay me to do, call them out, right? If I come back with feedback and they're like, well, that's not true. Who said that to you? I'm like, oh, there it is. There's why this culture has a covert bullying going on in it.
Yeah. And so we've been talking about kind of the once it's built, like the culture that kind of happens over time. What advice do you give, small companies, entrepreneurs, maybe teams of 5, 10, to not let them get there? How do you help them avoid the cliff?
Well, it's interesting because we just had the mission to around the moon, right? And you see these 4 astronauts, and they also obviously have such amazing culture. So if let's say we're taking those 4 people that have amazing culture and they've done something amazing, and we're building a team from that, they need to spend some time, and it takes a day, sometimes more, to really do a foresting project, which is we're going to go in and look at the trees, not just the forest. Oh, it's great, it's working really well, but the trees. Why? How is this working? How do we communicate? How do we hold each other accountable? How do we deal with conflict? And really get to the nitty-gritty of it, because if you don't know how it works, when someone else comes in, they're going to change it. And sometimes it's for the better. Sometimes you get people in and they're like, oh, I have this idea. And all 4 of you are like, that's a great idea. Let's do that. But at other times, somebody comes in and the personality is so big and so aggressive that it changes your culture, because the rest of you don't have a way to say, that's not how we do that here.
Yeah. Yeah, and that happened to, one of the books, which is one of the scariest things for me, is the book Snakes in Suits. Oh gosh, about the psychopath in the organization. And I've seen it where there's, as you say, a big person, and they woo everyone, and they pretty much remove the trusted people very quickly in the organization. And I don't think there's an answer to that once you allow a person like that to come in, because everyone here is saying, hang on, here's a problem with this specific person, but the executives may not, because they know how to talk the language
shine up
and
shit
them.
down.
Shine up, yeah.
That's crass, but that's really the truth. You see it with narcissism all the time. Like they shine up, they look really good, they're amazing, and they just walk on and trash their employees.
And I see companies basically get killed because of that. So yeah.
That's the scary thing when you end up with someone like that in your ranks. Is covert bullying is covert because you can't see it from the top.
Yeah, it's I've gone through a lot of, as a female engineer in the industry as well. Because I say we're not supposed to be there as women,
right?
And I can and then all the other sexual harassment type things. And I can remember this one and talking about, well, I'm not going to make this thing public. And again, depends on the person, right? And I can remember one male colleague was really, we would be in a data room and he would keep on making comments about my appearance to all the other, people in the room, and some of them reporting to me. So it's like undermining your role as well. And I wouldn't respond to that. But I can remember one morning he actually came in and he was standing in the door of my office and say, I think there's a problem. Why are we having a problem? So thank heavens he sort of realized. And I'm like, okay, well, here's the challenge is just how you treat me. And I don't understand why. I mean, we are peers and colleagues. We're supposed to have one another's backs, but why are you doing it? And he says, oh my gosh, I never realized. And then he told me that he was going through a very tough time and tough divorce and things. And for some reason, it's just the way he reacted. But thank heavens he had that sense to just come and say, well, I'm realizing this is, why are you giving me the cold shoulder?
Right.
was the whole thing. And it opened up the conversation. And I can know in other bullying cultures where, I call them the hyena pack, right? In Africa, we have a story about how do you manage the hyena pack. Well, you always look taller than lead hyena. And then the rest, because the hyena pack, when they're together, they go, ha, 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 look how fun it is. We bully everyone. We bully the lions. Everyone's scared of us. But once you address the lead hyena, then that changes the conversation. And again, this was around some very interesting machismo culture in this one company, and the CEO was sort of the lead in a lot of the conversation. But I can remember sitting again with this bunch of male colleagues, and there was an incident where the CEO made a statement, and this was the statement: when men have arguments in the boardroom, it's just the manly thing to do. But the minute two female executives have an argument in the boardroom and voices may get raised, then and this was the word to say, it's like the big switch being switched on. It caused a whole social media outburst. This was during Women's Month.
Wow.
In the country, and how outburst around this specific thing. And again, it was, and then I was in this group of meetings with the male peers, and again, the lead hyena they was like all about blah, 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 and they were openly using very crude and vulgar language, and I'm sitting there with another female executive. And anyway, so at the coffee station, one of these colleagues came in, because all the men are now participating in the hyena pack. No one would dare speak out, right, in front of male hyena. And I just had a fun conversation with him. And I asked him, I said, well, do you have a daughter or a wife? Yeah, I do. How would you feel if you sit in a meeting and say your wife is a peer in the meeting and the rest of the colleagues use that type of language? It was like his eyes were like this. It's like, oh, well, we'll really beat them up, right? I said, but why are you doing it to the rest of your female colleagues? And it was like the light switch suddenly turned on. So a lot of these side conversations, I think, is so good. But then it has to be how everyone holds agreement and how everyone holds everyone else accountable. So
and that's the challenge. If you haven't created an established method of holding people accountable, when you try to hold someone accountable, they're going to think you're being mean.
Yeah.
So you have to have an established, this is the way accountability works in this team.
Yeah. And I think there's good aspects. I know we spoke a lot in the prep call about coaches and coaches.
Coaches coaching coaches to coach coaches. Oy, deep pool, shallow people.
So yeah, that's both hilarious and terrifying in a way. So when founders actually need support, how do they find, what's your advice on how to find someone that's worth their budget, because they're spending the money on themselves? And how do they know how to get rid of a person quickly versus when actual discomfort is at work and it's helping them become more self-aware? So what's your advice on
So the first thing they have to do is they have to decide, are they looking for a package where someone's going to come in and just exchange knowledge, train them, give them information? That's one thing. And the challenge with those is that packages can be made to look like shiny boxes, but they're actually empty. But if you're looking for someone that's going to give you knowledge, just make sure they have the knowledge to give you and hire them. But if you're looking for someone who's going to be a think partner, that's more challenging because you need someone that doesn't have shiny packages of empty boxes. You need someone who has knowledge and skills and ability and background and experience. And those are harder to find. And you have to trust them. I tell my clients all the time, if you don't trust me within the first 20 minutes of us having a conversation, I'm probably not the right person for you, because I need to have that trust at a gut level. If I'm going to help you, you need to trust me with your whole story all of the time. I need to be your first phone call when things go sideways. So if you want someone who's going to be a think partner, you need to trust them. That's your first thing. Do you trust them? And use your BS meter. When you talk to someone, is it a whole bunch of shiny bells and whistles, or are they a real human being? And do a short stint with them. Don't sign a year-long contract at the beginning. If they do 3 months, do that. 6 months is better just because it takes time to get involved. But don't look for results in 3 months. Look for, do I still trust this person? Do I feel like we're heading in the right direction? And if you get 3, 4, 5 meetings in and you're like, I'm not getting what I need, ask. I had feedback one time from an executive I worked with. We worked like 6 months together. And at the end, I was like, what could I have done to make this better? And she said to me, I really wish that we had done more actual practice where like I got to say and you would be the other side. And I said, well, why didn't you ask for that? And she said, well, I thought you would recommend it if you thought it would help. If you want something, ask for it.
Well, you're not just a psychologist, you're a psychic, right?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
that comes
I
as
know
part of
all
it.
the answers all of the time. You don't even have to talk to me. I'll call you when I have answers. No.
You'll just reach out.
I'll
Would be
just
great.
reach out. Just pay me, I'll reach out when I know you have a problem. No, that's not how that works. But so yeah, decide, do you want a package? Are you looking for someone to just transfer knowledge, which is kind of management training type stuff, is transfer knowledge. But if you're looking for a think partner, start with someone that you feel like you can trust, and it's not bells and whistles, it's a real human being with real experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talked about this a little bit on our prep call, but just bringing up something from that, sometimes you have to date around with coaches, like therapists, like partners,
Yes.
business partners, life partners. You have to find the person that's going to match you, right? Like it's maybe not the first person you meet with.
And the other thing you have to think about is that being more expensive doesn't make it better, but you have to pay for quality. So price should not be a factor. Like, don't use it like, oh, it's expensive, it must be good, but also don't disqualify it because it's expensive. If you get someone with 20 years experience and a lot of like, I'm going to be more expensive than a 24-year-old life coach.
I would hope so. Just based on the beautiful documentation behind you. So we're coming to the end of the hour, and we could talk forever. We're definitely going to have you back on. It has been so wonderful. But before you go, I just want to ask one last question.
Okay.
For this session, if you could go back and hand every founder, every entrepreneur, every person that you've worked with a piece of psychological armor before they went in to raise their first round or do that next big thing, just one piece of psychological armor that you feel like everyone should put on in the morning when they do this type of work, when they're leading teams, when they're leading an organization, what would you say that is?
Oh, wow. That's a heavy question. Well, I guess one thing, I have to go back to what I said on my TEDx talk, which is if there's no water in the well, stop going there looking for a drink, which is when you learn that someone is not helpful, is toxic, is whatever. I don't care if you're blood related to them, stop going to them for advice. That's definitely one. And then I guess another one is that watch out for being overworked and overwhelmed and undervalued and underutilized and underestimated. I see so much of this in the entrepreneurial world. And when that happens, you need to step back and figure out, where is my zone of genius? What does that look like? And how do I make sure that I'm spending my time, energy, money, and effort in my zone of genius? and I'm outsourcing the other things. I'm bringing in experts in the other things, and I'm hiring experts and then listening to them. Don't hire an expert and then tell them how to do their job. But, so if there's no water in the well, stop going there looking for a drink and do your darndest to stay in your zone as genius as much as possible.
Oh, I love it.
That
I
is,
love that. That was amazing. And
Yeah.
and I feel like everyone
Yeah.
who's listening probably just was like, of course.
And you can get help doing that. Like, you don't have to do that by yourself. There are people, i.e. me and the two of you, who can help you do that.
Yeah. And I
right.
think it's also so important, again, if you want to be in that leadership role, especially building your company out, is show that you also, I mean, as I say, the top tennis players and top athletes didn't get there just on their own. They had a lot of support and coaches and mentors along the way. And if you show that's a habit for, I mean, you look at some of the top companies, right? All the top CEOs have the same, the good ones have the same people they surround themselves with. And I think if you can make that a habit, that can also show others and lead the way. That's how you help build those cultures, and that's why I also like the whole aspect of the principle of Ubuntu in a team, where Ubuntu is an African cultural perspective, which it's very simply phrased is I see you for who you are and the value that you bring. Not just recognizing myself. And that's why I also appreciate it with Christine, the female astronaut in the latest moon trip. I mean, what struck me was how close they were, but she also said that, gave a definition around the word crew, and you're actually building, coming back to the cruise ship, that crew that will take this company forward and help to execute on the mission, right? A successful mission, apart from all the preparedness that each one had to have. It's that whole willingness to and she used this word, silently sacrifice themselves for one another.
It has to be good for everyone, not just for me.
Yeah. So, but thank you so much. This was such a wonderful and such an important topic, because so many companies are so stuck just on product and customers that the cultural aspect, and at the end of the day, it's people that makes then your ability to lead people that's going to make the company successful.
And that's true for investors and the people that you're working with. I mean, we've had that conversation, Maria. You don't bring in investors that you don't trust and like either.
Yeah, everyone needs to get on board with the no assholes.
Right.
Path. Just no assholes inside, no assholes attached.
Exactly.
Because it really does help. It makes your day is better. You spend so much time doing this stuff, and you're trying so hard.
And you're more productive.
Yeah.
And as my one friend Kimberly always used to say, is don't become a bosshole yourself.
Yeah, I love it.
Great.
Well, I would love it if you would tell our audience a little bit about how to reach you, how to connect with you, and potentially work with you. And we'll definitely put that in the description and the show notes as well.
Okay, well, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active there, so they can find me, Dr. Robyn Lynette, on LinkedIn. I also have my website, mentalmacgyver.com, so they can find me there. Yeah, Mental MacGyver. I was given that moniker by a client, so mentalmacgyver.com. And if the people are interested in my origin story and the chaos that was my life, they can learn about that. My memoir is out, called I'd Like to Thank the Cartel for Getting Me Out of the Cult, and that website is thankthecartel.com.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And this is Maria Pienaar from Scalespark and
Katie Whitcraft.
Thank you for joining us, and looking forward to further conversations.
Thanks for listening to Ops or Die, the podcast for all things business operations, with your hosts, Maria Pienaar and Katie Whitcraft. Our theme music, composed by Min Tran, and editing services provided by Troubleshoot Productions. For more information on how to make your operations smart ops, visit www.scalespark.ai.